All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jeff. I'm really excited to have you here. Jeff has done some incredible things in the business world, and I am just absolutely honored that he's on the podcast. I know you guys are going to get a lot of value from him. He has had multiple successful businesses, exited two businesses. Is that correct?
Yep, two major exits and a couple of minor exits. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. So just like super excited to pick your brain on how you've scaled and built companies, what your processes are, what observations you've made, and just like building a successful business versus a lot of people that start off and don't ever get to that point of exiting a
Yeah.
business. But what was like your start in business? Did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
It's funny. It's funny. I did when I went to MIT for computer science because I was like, I have to do like that's what I thought I wanted to do. And very quickly at that place, you're surrounded by a lot of people who are talking about like literally from the moment I walked in, everyone's talking about starting new things and building new companies and things like that. So I was completely infected with the idea from the get-go, to the point where when I graduated, I did get a job at first when I graduated. So, but in my mind, I like had that like this is just like passing time until I can finally start a company, right? Or getting ideas or things like that. But yeah, I always wanted to do it.
That's super interesting. I don't think I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur until I was like in almost in college. So that's cool that you kind of always knew. Like were you
Yeah.
raised around
Yeah,
entrepreneurship?
it's funny because when I think a little further back, so my first computer was an Apple II when I think I was like 9 years old when my dad got an Apple II, and like he brought it home just to like test it. He was a doctor, so he bought it for his office, but he wanted to like configure it for a month before he took it to his office. And like a month later, like my mom yelled at him. She's like, "You're not taking that away from Jeff." Like that's because it became my best friend. I'm like, this thing's amazing, like a
Yeah.
computer, right? And so what was interesting about the Apple II ecosystem that was just incredible is that you could buy these games and they'd show up in like Ziploc bags. So like Ziploc bags and like a stapled user manual and a little floppy disk. And
Okay.
and these were like some of these games were written by like some guy that called himself Lord British, and then these people like Ken and Roberta Williams. So these just people that were like had Apple IIs and like started writing games, and these became massive companies like right in front of my eyes. So,
Wow.
as a 9-year old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, you see these guys were shipping me like Ziploc bags when I was 9. And now they're these like multi-million-dollar companies. I think one of them, Sierra Online, which was Ken and Roberta Williams' company, that might have become like over $1 billion. I mean, so these became massive companies. So it sort of opened my eyes to like, wow, these people use the same computer that I have in front of me, started doing programming like I'm doing, started writing games, and then shipped Ziplocs and turned that into something bigger. So I think that's what gave me the feeling that like starting a company, it's not like there's these immortal things that just like dropped from the heavens and started doing things. Like these people were just like me, maybe
Hmm.
a little bit older than I was, but it was the same, right? They didn't have anything that I didn't have access to.
Did you ever like look into building a game yourself?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I was obsessed, like to the point where after I played the games long enough, like, I started breaking into like sector editors to like look into like see how it's playing. Like I change all the characters so they say things they weren't supposed to say. Like I got in trouble for because my little brother played a game and like one of the guards swore at him, and obviously that came back to me. But like, yeah, I would try to figure out like how do you build this? And to the point where like with Lord British, who built the Ultima series, I was like obsessed with like how does he do this? Like I would try to reverse engineer his games, and I got pretty darn good at it, to the point where like freshman year in high school I built a game. I spent a year building a game that was like pretty much on par with like a game that was like maybe one edition older of his, right? So I was
Hmm.
like not quite latest and greatest, but pretty darn close. And we actually sent it to him, and he
Wow.
responded. He was like, we don't publish other people's games, but how old did you say you were again? Like he was pretty kind of
That's
like taken
cool.
aback in a good way, that like it was almost like, wow, okay, someone is a fan enough of my work that they've built something like with all the same engines and all the same things. So
Yeah.
I tried, I mean, these guys were my heroes growing up. So I tried to model like Steve Wozniak. Like I would look at everything he did, and like I wanted to become like these guys growing up. I was like,
Yeah.
this is amazing. Like just that you can just take a computer and just turn it into this, amazing
Right.
business and just this amazing creative thing where you could build these worlds and things like that.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people talk about how like if you don't have an entrepreneur or somebody like right next to you in your social circle to look up
Yeah.
to. Like you can find somebody at a
Yeah.
distance, either read their books or, dissect their products like you were doing, and really like have them almost like this virtual mentor in your life where you're just studying what they're doing and kind of duplicating that in your own life. So that
That's,
sounds
I
like
mean, that's exactly right. And so, and even though, the internet wasn't available then, but I still had like, there weren't a ton of people in the Apple II world. So I could kind of see all their stuff and follow, I could pick my heroes and follow them and everything they did and watch the magazines and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean,
yeah.
these are like some of my best friends growing up, right? Even though I didn't know them.
Yeah, that's super cool. And you mentioned, so like when you got out of college, you started working, like you kind of knew that was going to be a temporary thing.
Yeah.
Did you know like what business you wanted to start and you were just building capital, or were you kind of just like open to
I
whatever
think
came your way?
building experience, and I would say like in hindsight, I'm really glad I did. So I worked for a company called Sapient right out of school.
Okay.
They became a really big company. There was like I was like the 40th person hired, and then 6 months later, I was number 100 when I started. And
Wow.
so I mean they were on a cliff. And when I left about a year later, I think they were up to 400. They eventually had thousands of people. That was an amazing experience. And I mean, I'd recommend whether you get a job or somewhere else. Like what I realized about, I think I had the renegade idea before that, where I'm like, oh, starting a company is about being a renegade, right? I'm going to go do my thing and do everything different. What I got from Sapient is just, I was a sponge. Like I learned how to build systems like learned so much about how to establish the business case for a piece of software, how to
Mhm.
like visualize it quickly so you could have like a little prototype that people could kick the tires on this. People are doing Figma prototypes all the time. Like I was, when I 21, I built a prototype in Visual Basic, like a fake system. And 3 days later, like the CEO of a major company was showing it to 2,000 shareholders. Sorry, 2,000 of his sales reps. He's like,
Wow.
look at what the future is. So to me, that was a shift for me, actually, not to go on a too far in a tangent, but I would say my childhood hero was Steve Wozniak. When I worked for Sapient, I got into the world, and I kind of learned about the building the business case for things. It sort of shifted to Steve Jobs, and I still love, if Woz is out there, I still love Woz. Still, obviously, a huge fan. But like, I started realizing what that other Steve did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so a
Yeah.
lot of like what I got out of Sapient was like, how do you position, how do you frame, how do you rally, how do you get people excited about something? So how do you start from this idea, and how do you really crystallize the idea and then start getting people excited? How do you build a prototype or a visualization, right? So that you
Mhm.
could show people something to get them more excited, recruit more people, build this momentum and get it going. So I learned so much from that, so that when I finally started a company one more job later, so I went from Sapient, I worked for Arthur D. Little for about a year and a half, which is the world's oldest management consulting company. Another amazing experience because I got to work with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. To juxtapose these kind of real world scenarios and then to put my own spin on it just was an amazing experience, right? Because when we started OEC, which was my company I started right after working there, um, we had a lot more idea to it. Like we had a lot more structure, if that makes sense. It wasn't just we're going to do something completely different. It was like, okay, we're going to do this weird hybrid of kind of what Sapient's doing, kind of what Arthur D. Little's doing with our own twist on it. We're going to make it our own. And because we had all that experience, we had a lot more momentum. Versus
Yeah.
versus if I left college with a blank sheet of paper, I would have just spun my wheels. So it's like
Right.
balancing that, like try to get as much experience as you can, knowing at some point, okay, I'm gonna want to put my own flavor on this.
Hmm. Yeah, that's super cool because I think that's something a lot of people in my generation miss out on because they
Mhm.
get out of college and their objective is just get the job with the most amount of money.
Yeah,
Whereas if you when you work for a startup or you work for a company in the specific industry you want to go into business in, you're getting paid to learn. So it's like all that stuff
yeah,
that you would have had to learn in your own business, now you're getting paid to learn on someone else's dime. And that's like for me, that was super valuable when I got out of college. I actually dropped out early, but I just jumped into the workforce and I worked in a few different industries and I learned a ton.
yeah,
And it was, I was able to develop the skills that like without those, I would have had to just fall on my face over and over again.
yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's like a really, really good nugget. And then, so you said after that second job, you started your business. Did you start that on your own or did you?
No, so there were three of us. So it was my brother and then a really good friend of mine from college who had also
Okay.
worked from Arthur D. Little. And fun fact, and maybe a best practice for future companies, they put us in the same office, which maybe wasn't a good idea.
That's funny.
Because we
So you
spent a lot of time brainstorming, like when are we
right.
going to do this thing, right? So,
Yeah. So what was like what when you initially started that company, what was the vision for it?
oh my God, there was no vision, right? So I wish I could say. I think the vision was like, so this was so we started it in 1996, but we started brainstorming it in 1995, and the world was just exploding with ideas, and it was like there were all these ideas in the atmosphere that you knew like each of these is going to become a multi-billion-dollar company. So I think every Saturday we would go up to my grandmother used to have a beach cottage that was just there. So we'd go there every weekend and we'd lock ourselves in a room and brainstorm like which huge like we built all these amazing ideas, and then we didn't build any of them. We wrote them down and we're like, yeah, we're going to do chat. We're going to do internet chat long before any of them had done it.
Yeah.
Then we came up with like 5 other ideas, and like every one of the ideas we did in my grandmother's cottage became multi-billion-dollar companies, but we didn't execute any of them. So someone
Yeah.
else, like we had like a moment of silence every time like one of these companies like got bought for like $1 billion or something. Like, oops, we didn't take any action on that. So eventually we got to the point where we're like, all right, let's do the picks and shovels thing for a while, right? So like we know the internet's going to be huge. It's a massively expanding thing. So let's just go out and do some consulting and take on some projects and be a little opportunistic and see where that goes. And that's so we started doing that and grinded away a little bit and then started to hit our stride maybe 6 months into that, where we got some really interesting projects. And then we got so the first one being like it's a funny story, like and this is where maybe boldness is a good thing. So to put the time in place. So if you think of e-commerce companies today, so imagine in 1997, I think it was early January 97, e-commerce was like, okay, I have a catalog company, right? I ship a printed catalog and people check off what they want and they call it in or they mail it in, right, or whatever. That was e-commerce, right? Or that was commerce, I guess,
Yeah.
right? So we talked to this company called Elcom, and we met with them, and they're like, at the time, all the companies in the space were like, okay, if you want 5 products online, it's X amount of dollars. For 6 products, it's Y amount of dollars. And if you have
Wow.
8 products, we'll put 8 products online for something, right? So we're in this meeting and we're like, in our early 20s, maybe mid 20s, and the CEO of the company's like, we have 27,000 products, right? And so what do you think? And we're like, we'll do the whole thing. And
Wow.
I just remember that car ride home, like we were looking at each other like, how the heck are we going to figure this out? But we knew we could, right? We kind
Yeah.
of, because we were, maybe it was like when we saw all these people saying, oh, we could put 5 products or 6 products, it kind of insulted us. Like, it was like, that's so foolish. Like, you can do more than like this
Yeah.
technology can do more than that. And so
Yeah.
now we had put our, big mouth out there and promised that we were going to do 27,000 products. And so we did. And so we, over the course of a couple of months, and like we pulled all-nighters, but they did too. And like, so here's like an interesting thing is like, so that was one of the best clients I've ever had, because they were so bought into that crazy vision like we were, that like they would have like, people from their company at our office up with
Wow.
2 a.m. with us, working side by side, trying to figure out how the heck are we going to take these. It wasn't even Adobe Illustrator, it was something predecessor of that. How do we convert that into a data thing, structured data, and then build out a whole e-commerce engine, get this thing on the web? And we pulled it off. And so that gave us a lot of confidence, and like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Probably helped reinvent that business, right? None of their competitors are online. Suddenly their entire catalog was online in like
Wow.
mid 97. So that was like, for me, it was like, wow, okay, we know this is transformative and we just pulled it off. So what do we do next? And so we got into Thompson Financial, which is very forward-looking company that's just always looking to come up with new products. And we started building things for them. And that was just ridiculously fun. I mean, first of all, it helped because the budgets got a lot bigger once we got into financial services, but like the stuff we were working on was just super fun. And we'd like ideate these things and put them on a whiteboard and then program for a few months and release it. And then these would be like multi-million-dollar products.
Wow.
So that was like,
That
that was just fun.
yeah. Yeah. I'm assuming like years ago that was a lot more of a process to go and like list these products and build it out, and then probably also like driving traffic. Like, what
Yeah.
do you see now in like the e-commerce space? Like,
Yeah.
where do you think, because like you were ahead of the game there, what do you think the next kind of like big industry is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really insightful point too, right? Because like, yeah, like we had to build all the infrastructure and we never even got to traffic, right? Which is pretty funny because like Elcom had the traffic was all of their catalog customers. It's just that we cut so much friction out of, so this is an existing business. We cut so much friction out of it that things exploded. For Thompson, there's no traffic there, right? Which became a sore point for me later because I realized that you don't just build things and they become $1 million things, right? Thompson knew how to sell like crazy. So when we'd build a piece of software, they would sell it and it would go crazy. When I think today, it's funny because part of the challenge is so many things have matured, right? That now you look around and everything's a red ocean, right? So we didn't have that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Problem we had is there's no plumbing anywhere in the internet, right? It's like basic plumbing, right? You could get a web browser working, you could sort of communicate, get computers to kind of communicate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to build everything, but that was fun. When I look now and I say, okay, what are the opportunities now? I think it gets to AI. And I know that's a little bit of a hand wavy answer, but there's so many opportunities to, if you could figure out how to collaborate with AI. So I'm not talking about the low hanging fruit of AI where people are using it to generate a lot of content. In some cases, it's junk content.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about figuring out how to use AI to collaborate and figure out where these little blue ocean pockets are to go after. I think that's what the opportunity is because I can't answer your question directly. Like in e-commerce, I would know. I've run some e-commerce companies. They're really hard.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they can be really hard, especially like one of the companies I ran with my brother a couple of years ago. We had to deal with like currency. We were doing like Europe. So we had to deal with like currency conversions and things like that. So we were running like 30% gross margin, which was great, except we got killed on currency conversion because of because of dollar fluctuation. So
Mm.
there's a lot of challenges if you're running an e-commerce business that you have to be careful about. But I would say that find something if e-commerce is the thing, make sure you find a product that's something that's pretty awesome, that's pretty amazing,
Yeah.
something that's differentiated because I feel like that, and kind of answering this question in real time, I feel like this comes down to the principle of asymmetric bets or asymmetric upside.
Okay.
So if you think of the concept of like venture capitalists, right, when they place bets, for every 10 or 20 bets they place, if they write a check for $25,000, they can lose $25,000 on that bet, right? But the upside could be a lot more than that. And so an example would be like Peter Thiel gave $500,000 to Facebook, I think in their seed round or Series A, and that was worth, he sold it too soon for like billions of dollars years later. So that was a massive upside. So when VCs, so this is a concept of asymmetric risk, is that okay, I can lose $25,000 or $500,000, but the upside is limitless, right?
Yeah.
And what the way VCs play this on a portfolio is to say, I don't know which of my bets is going to win, but if I place 10 or 20 bets, if one of those is 100x, then that more than makes up for the whole portfolio, even if most of them go under.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
how this translates to an entrepreneur is like, you got to figure out how to do this yourself as an entrepreneur because, first of all, if you're a funded entrepreneur, you don't want to be one of those 9 or 19 bets that fail.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And second of all, I think that AI gives us the ability to, as entrepreneurs, play that game a little more, where you can place a lot of bets. And if one of those bets explodes, so in the e-commerce example, you run a bunch of products and one of those products is like 100 times more interesting than the other to the market. You don't know at the beginning.
Right.
That's how your e-commerce business explodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So just
not grinding out. It's not taking a tough product and figure out how do we push this rock up the hill.
mm-hmm.
It's like you got to test. You got to test more. If you feel like you're always pushing the rock up the hill, go back to the testing phase and say, okay, what's the product? Why does this exist? Do people even care about this?
Yeah, there's a great analogy this guy Alex Hormozy gave. I was listening to his podcast yesterday and he was talking about his most recent book. I think I don't know, he spent like 200 hours or something crazy writing it. But he was talking about how like in the past, like when he was a new entrepreneur, he would have just spent like, a couple of years writing a decent book and
Mhm.
then spent the rest of his life advertising that decent book to drive traffic. But his perspective now is he's going to spend as many years as it takes to write a really fantastic book so that he doesn't have to advertise it. It advertises itself. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
That's a
So,
really interesting perspective. So I would liken that to the Tesla approach, right? So
mhm.
Tesla, at least I maybe recently, as far as I know, they don't spend money on advertising, right? But what they've done is created an absolutely incredible product, like reinvented an ecosystem. Like anyone who has a Tesla thinks there's warts, right? But it's like it's like it's an amazing experience. So, and sometimes I think of this as I think I called it the Trinity effect in one of my podcast episodes. So I was exploring this with a friend of mine that built an application called Native Numbers for iPad about 12 years ago. So we wanted to build a math app. The iPad had come out. We're like, okay, there's interesting educational affordances. So my friend had gotten his doctorate from Harvard in education, brilliant learning specialist. And so we were like, okay, what affordances do we now have with the iPad that we didn't have before?
Mhm.
And so we went back to this like research study from the 90s that had it showed an amazing ability to teach little kids math, but not a scalable ability. Meaning if you had
Mhm.
a one-on-one tutor and you sent kids what I think they took wealthy kids as a control group and took poor kids, usually poor kids don't come in with as good math skills because they're not counting at night or whatever, right? So they took the poor kids as the intervention group and had one-on-one tutoring for 12 hours for a year, over the course of a year. And at the end of the year, they caught up and surpassed the control kids, the wealthier kids. But the crazy thing is, a year later, they continued to track above them without any additional intervention. So
Wow.
my reason for bringing this up is that was incredible research that then never went anywhere because the affordances to scale weren't there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when we built Native Numbers, what we said is, okay, if we could take that research and combine it with the affordances of the iPad, what could we create? And we
Right.
went all in on that. I mean, we did some crazy things that you can't do sustainably in business for a long time. So we literally said, we don't care. The only thing that matters is that this thing is an amazing product. It's an amazing learning experience for kids. Like that's literally all we did. And that was a very expensive constraint. I mean, we
Yeah.
put well over a year, the two of us, we probably spent a couple $100,000 in terms of time and money investing in building this application, and we launched it, and it just, from a learning perspective, exploded. It went viral over time.
Mhm.
And we
That's
think it's right. And so that, what I'd say is that the Trinity effect means that for most things, you've heard of the 80-20 thing, right? Where
yeah.
80-20 is like quickly get out there, get the value. So this like a big chunk of value you can get at 80-20. I think there's another chunk of value. I'd say it's like, call it the nuclear level of value. The challenge is it's really hard to get there. And if you're not willing to go all the way up the curve, then you're just going to spend a lot more than the 80-20 without getting the extra value. But if you
Mm.
manage to get all the way up the curve, you unleash a nuclear bomb. So that's why I liken it to like, if you take a nuclear bomb that almost works, it just fizzles. It doesn't do anything. And if it works, it's like,
Right.
megatons of energy.
So
So
get all the way up that curve, is that just increased like time and effort?
it's insane obsession is what I would say. So like what Alex Hermosi's doing, right? That he's in a good position to do that, right? So
Yeah.
this is a tough choice to be able to go down that path. But it's almost a philosophy. Like if you commit to doing it all the way, then long term it'll pay off if you make it over that hump. But the
Hmm.
nuclear hump is much, 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 much higher than like the 80-20 hump. So
Hmm.
it's a really tough decision to make. Like to make the decision that like Alex Hormozi making, or what we made with Native Numbers, or Elon risked everything on Tesla and SpaceX. The payoff is amazing, right? Like we're going to go to the moon soon and Mars soon after that because of it.
Hmm.
But it's so much of a higher bar. So you have to be very cognizant of the risk you're taking.
Right. Yeah. It's like that, like to become part of that 0.1%, you have to do what 99.9% of people aren't willing to do.
Yeah,
So,
but I think you have to pace yourself too, right? And I think that if you look at like, say, Alex Hormozi, for instance, right? So he, and I'm going to say this very carefully, he got lucky with the gym thing. What I mean by that, I have a very precise definition of luck, right? To me, luck, entrepreneurialism is all about luck, by the way, in my opinion. So you
Mhm.
take asymmetric upside, right? What it means is he worked his tail off and was therefore when the opportunity was there and he was prepared, those two hit together and exploded.
Yeah.
Right. So what he did with Gym Launch was a Trinity kind of event, like
Mhm.
because he worked his tail off to be ready for he earned the right to be there when opportunity knocked, but he didn't get to choose when opportunity knocked.
Right.
So I think it's very important to you have to figure out how do you live to stay on the battlefield, but also be ready for that asymmetric bet, the
Right.
Facebook, the Gym Launch, right? For me, the native numbers, like whatever. So you have to be careful not to burn up all your resources and then be, toast when the opportunity knocks, but you can't answer the door because you have to go get another job.
Right. So would
That's
you
that's
say,
practically how it works.
yeah. So like by your definition of luck, would you say everyone is going to be presented with some form of luck at some point? It's just a matter of being prepared when you are presented with that opportunity?
Yeah, I think so. I would define it this way, right? So if you're prepared and if you like aware, curious, right? It's not just you work hard, but you're kind of curious, you kind of keep your open, you're looking around, you're kind of like, if you're prepared, there's going to be a stream of opportunities throughout your life that come your way. Those opportunities, I think as humans, we're wired for linear thinking.
Mhm.
So we think okay, if I were to say some are going to be better than others, you'd be like, well, yeah, of course. But what we think as humans, when we say some are better than others, yeah, this one's a little better, this one's not quite as good, right? What
Yeah.
I'm saying is that some of those are going to be 100x, 1,000x, 10,000x. And the paradox is you're not going to know which
Mm.
is sort of how you have to be prepared and opportunistic. You have to be able to pay your bills and
Yeah.
then ready to swing the bat,
Yeah.
because I would say that luck is critical, but luck is about being prepared, living to fight the day, and then and acknowledging that there is a sense of this luck over time. It will happen for you if you play the game and understand that it's that portfolio that's going to work.
Right. Yeah. One thing I also wanted to dive into was the blog, which I know we chatted about before
Yeah.
the
Yep.
podcast. Because I just think it's cool because like you're mentioning how that was like a great networking platform for you
Yeah.
as the blog. You met people through that. And I know some people monetize it, but even just to like create an audience or to network to meet people, I think that's an incredible way that like a lot of people could start a blog of some sort. So what was sort of like your process where you like started that and then like were you writing once a week or
Yeah. No,
what?
it's really funny because I only did it for about a 2 year period of time, and it was I think it was 2000, maybe late 2008 to some, or maybe somewhere mid 2010. What was I wrote the blog because I had to, insofar as like I started having ideas and patterns that I saw again and again because I was talking to a lot of founders. And I realized I'm like, okay, I have to distill my thinking on it. So, and this is going to sound weird. Like for me, the audience of the blog was me. And like I was writing it to get my thoughts down. And then when I read it enough times, you're like, yeah, that's how I think about this. Right. So like, for instance, like I wrote a post about like so many people are talking about, oh, I got to raise money. I need to raise money. And I kept hearing need. And I was like, okay, something's not right here. Something's not going to work. Something doesn't work here. And I see it again and again and again. So I wrote a post and I was like, okay, the number one strategy for raising money is don't need it.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, that could be the whole post, right? Jokingly. And like, okay, now here's what I mean by that.
Right.
That was really useful for me because, okay, I distilled my thinking and it was no longer a pattern. Now, if I see it again, okay, I can say this pattern. And
Mhm.
that's a lot of the blog posts. The side effect of doing the blog was then suddenly I realized that all these people were finding me because of these blog posts, and I was having conversations around it because of it. So I
Yeah.
didn't start that as a business. So if I started as a content business, I would say, so if you're saying today and
Mhm.
right, newsletter, blog, like anything like that, I would say that if all of these things that we talked about, like asymmetric upside, apply to content too, and there's like this weird exponential growth you need to create an audience with content. So from an observer, what people and the advice is like, you have to keep doing it. You have to stay with it and be consistent, right? The important thing is, I feel like if you're going to be consistent, it has to spill out of you. If you find yourself pushing yourself to be consistent, if it's a grind, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
In other words, I feel like you could put all the time and effort and never climb that hockey stick curve if you
Right.
push yourself. Whereas when I look at like the people who are successful, it seems like they have that same feeling like I had like with my blog post, like I have to write this. It looks like they like have to comment on this, like it's just
Yeah.
it's exploding out of them. And I feel like if you're going to be doing content, which I think you do in this day, and I think that's a big thing, you have to find something that your curiosity and as you go deep, more stuff spills out of you as you do that. So
Yeah.
that you can then consistently follow up and eventually get lucky over time when you suddenly hit a topic that just blows up.
Right. Yeah, because you're just doing it for like the right reasons,
Yeah.
natural, not forced. That was also another takeaway I had from Alex Ramosi is his first book. He talks about how like he originally just wrote that to be an internal document.
Yeah.
And his wife Layla was like, no, this like you should publish this.
Yeah.
And now it's taken off and it's become like a bestseller. And so I think that definitely speaks to your point of like when you just write it because it's something that's already in your brain that you need to get
Yeah.
out, that you want to put on paper or you want to put in a video or whatever it is, that's when it's going to be natural and authentic and people appreciate that authenticity because in this world like there's so much of just like this surface level information and advice and it's just people are craving that authenticity.
Exactly. And also like I remember reading his first book and just being stunned by it. I mean, this is like I've read over the past 20 years, I've read so much marketing, like all sorts of marketing things, right? So I thought I had read it all. What was interesting to me about his book, it was just distilled, like everything was distilled into formulas and like everything was precise. And it was like, it really felt like super polished rocks when you read it, right? Like,
Yeah.
wow, this is really, this isn't like, okay, I want to write a book and let's type until I have enough pages. This is like, to your point, right? He didn't write it to write a book. He wrote it to get his thinking down. And then because of that, it's pure value. He released it.
Yeah.
That's why it took off because people recognize quality. If you break out, if you're going to go for that quality, you have to go all the way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like back to what you're saying of like you have to just become obsessed with it too, because like he just loves to write. So like I've heard I like study him. I listen to his podcast every day. And
Yeah.
like I've heard him say a lot of times like he just like loved to write. And what he did was he would just basically lock himself in his room for 6 hours at the beginning of every day and write. And like that was 6 hours a day for like multiple years of him writing that book.
Yeah.
And so the amount of times he rewrote it and then change this and change that, like to make it what it is now, it's so concise and it's so valuable and so clear because it wasn't just the first draft that he released. Like he really made sure that everything he was putting on paper was exactly how he meant to articulate it.
Yeah.
So
I think this is great. And I think, so you kind of bring up an interesting tension that I think is a good tension that like, to get really good at something, you have to go all the way down the rabbit hole, right? You have to really commit yourself to something. You have to say no to a lot of things. You have to be really curious about a domain and go all the way in. But what I said before is still true about asymmetric bets. You also have to get lucky, right? Quote unquote.
yeah.
So how do you handle this tension, I guess would be the question. And what I would say is that if you can find, there's sort of like pick your domain and just get all excited. Like you have to be really curious about it. Like you have to want to do this, right? If I wasn't getting paid, I want to do this kind of thing, right? And then run lots of hypotheses on the surface so that you get the benefit of running multiple bets. So
Mm-hmm.
go all in on a, so I guess what I'd say is go all in on a domain. Don't go all in on a bet.
Yeah.
Figure out how to place multiple hypotheses and then double down and triple down intelligently as you realize, okay, the domain you got to stick with, right? But the bet might be, okay, this bet didn't work, this bet did work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then that's how you find these opportunities to just explode.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I know you mentioned AI too, like
Yeah.
as something that's an emerging industry. And so what do you think some like opportunities there for like my generation? Obviously, we're pretty tech savvy.
Yeah.
But AI is new to everyone. So what do you think some kind of like opportunities there are, like easy to start businesses in that industry that might be, a good place to make your first $1,000?
Yeah, and I'm gonna give you a bizarre answer. Instead of answering your question, I'm gonna tell you how to use AI to answer your question, right?
Okay.
Right, because you're asking the exact right question is like, where should I focus my time? Like what should I do right now? And I think that there's a weird, so the project I'm working on now is called AI Fieldbook, right? So we're trying to answer a lot of these exact questions, right? How do you figure out AI kind of beyond the noise of like, I think I got an ad on Facebook this morning. It's like, this comes with 300,000 prompts. It's like, what am I going to do with 300,000 prompts?
That's a lot.
Right. And that's what I feel like when I go out to like learn something about AI, it's like, it's just a scatter shot of all this stuff.
Hmm.
Okay. But what is AI actually emerging to be really good at? And how
Hmm.
can I use that into some kind of process to help me get to the answer to your question? And
Right.
I think what's bizarre and shocking about AI. No one would have thought this like 20 years ago. Say, what will AI be good at? AI would be good at like stuff computers are good at. It's going to just get much better at that. The idea of AI as a creative brainstorming partner is the most ridiculous and impossible. And like, how could that ever happen? Right. And yet
Hmm.
that's kind of what has happened. Right.
Yeah.
So I think of it as, call it three main steps that you'd want to take with AI. And I think step number one is ideation, meaning like, how can I use AI to like, because question would be like, what you said, okay, what should people do to make $1,000? Okay, well, you need ideas.
Right.
And so the problem is I don't have enough ideas.
Hmm.
So if you work with AI and you collaborate with the idea, you could be stuffed full of ideas, fully researched. I mean, you can literally work with the AI and be like, what about this industry? What about that industry? What about these challenges? Right.
Hmm.
And I think you're going to see a lot of the like AI as brainstorming partner. So step one is like, get me like this huge pile of too many ideas and hypotheses that I couldn't in 10 lifetimes possibly go after them all.
Hmm.
Wouldn't that be cool? And like have them all like ranked value, like here's the
Yeah.
research, here's the sentiment analysis. If I look at Amazon reviews, here's like, this is all stuff I would have said years ago. Yeah, go research the Amazon stuff. We'll have the AI do it for you. So imagine that now you start with like 100 ideas for what you just said. How do I make $1,000? Okay, now you've got all of these ideas.
Hmm.
And now going to step two, which is, okay, I've got all these ideas. I need to start placing bets.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there are two mistakes you can make placing bets. If I don't if I don't do enough work, then I haven't really tested the thing.
Mm.
Okay, let me go to the other mistake. The big mistake is put it all on red number 7. It's great if it comes, the wheel spins red number 7, then you can write a book about how all you got to do is go red number 7, but chances are it won't, you'll lose everything. So
Mm.
you can't put all your, chips on one bet. The other extreme is if the bets aren't well formed enough and you just conclude, oh, that's not a good idea. And I think I see people doing this all the time. I've done this a million times, right? Oh, I
Mm.
tried that. It didn't work. Right. Well, maybe you didn't get up to the 80-20. Maybe your minimum viable product was not really viable. It wasn't really interesting. And it didn't really compel anyone to take any action. So that wasn't a good bet. So if you place 100 terrible bets, the asymmetric thing's not going to work for you. They're all going to fail.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
what you need to figure out is, but we did say you have to be excellent. So I feel like if you can use the AI and say, okay, here are like, say, 100 opportunities I can go after. And again, ask the AI to help you with
Yeah.
what's a domain that like covers 20 or 30? Like, is there some pattern in these 100
Hmm.
that I can look at? Well, these 20 are kind of similar, right? Maybe 20 of them are like, say, e-commerce, for instance, and they're just 20 different products or variations or stuff like that. Okay. Well, maybe I can commit to e-commerce.
Yeah.
And then maybe my bets are around those 20 hypotheses. And so, okay, I'm going to figure out how to turn those 20 hypotheses into action that I can take and start executing those and seeing what works, what doesn't. And
Right.
again, using the AI to help you do that as you go, but ultimately placing real bets, like getting out there, trying to sell something, seeing if it works. Try,
Right.
fail, try, fail. Right. I
So
think
it's, oh, sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
so I think that like, I think that strangely, the question you asked, like, where do I get started? It was in one way easier for me, say 30 years ago, because like nothing was built. So the
Yeah.
answer would be like, go pick any problem and go solve it, right?
Hmm.
It's a little harder now because there's a lot of red oceans everywhere you look. But I think that with AI as a collaboration partner, I think you can come up with those 100 hypotheses, and I think it can help you structure, how do I place, what is a, for each of these hypotheses, what's a minimum viable product look like for each of these? Or what can I test? What are some clever ways to test that? What are guerrilla marketing techniques I can use to get out there? Keep
Yeah.
peeling that onion until you're like, all right, now I can really test these things and stumble upon something that's good, and then make sure you double and triple down on it.
So it comes down to like asking the right questions.
Yeah, and I think, or asking the AI to help you with the right questions too. And
Right.
it's comical because yes, the answer is asking the right questions. And a few years ago, it'd be like, well, you better go figure out the right questions. Now it's like, well, you now have this tool that will, if you don't
Yeah.
have the right questions, just ask it what the right questions are and ask it again and keep tweaking it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
don't be lazy, right? The problem, the thing that annoys me about AI is that a lot of people are using it to put a lot of terrible content out there.
Yeah.
So they're just like, they're kind of being lazy. They're seeing AI as this ability to put out tons of garbage with the hope that some of that garbage will go through. And like what I said before, like 100 bad bets aren't going to do anything. A million bad bets aren't either, except you're doing bad, you're dumping toxic nonsense on the world.
Hmm.
If you collaborate with the AI, you'd be shocked at, if you have a conversation with it and really refine your idea, it can really help you create some magical ideas. But you need to be a part of that process too. Don't just like say, go launch my business and then do. I mean, I see people doing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yesterday it was funny. I was filming a video for my Instagram, and I went onto AI, and I was like, I put the idea that I had in, and I was like, generate a script. Just one, because I'd never done that. I just wanted to like see what it would come up with. And what I got out of that conversation was exactly what I didn't want to do, which then led me to what I actually wanted to do. Because I was like,
yeah,
I cannot use this script that it just gave me. That is horrible. But I was like, oh, like, well, that's the opposite of what I want to do. So now I've clarified what I do want to do. And then I just came up and I wrote my own script. So it wasn't giving me anything I could use, but it still helped get the creative juices flowing. And then I was able to just completely on my own come up with a script that was more along what I wanted. So I think that,
I,
to your
I
point, it's
love I love this story because I've seen this play out so many times, and it's such a bizarre story that like basically what happens is AI sometimes will tell you something that's so terrible that it like pisses you off.
yeah.
It triggers something in your brain. So you went from like, because it's like you kind of went from this like kind of like not motivated to move state, and now suddenly you're in this like, no, that's not how you do it. Now you're engaged and they're like, this is how you do it. Give me that. Like it's like
Yep.
taking the computer away from AI and saying, go sit down. Here's how you do it. And next
Yeah.
thing you know, it's like you just defeated the blank page problem that's been like plaguing people for forever.
Hmm.
AI
Yeah.
helped you do that by getting it exactly wrong. And sometimes it'll give you, so that's why I think AI is a brainstorming partner, because it'll help you fill in the blank. Like if you, okay, it triggers ideas and like, okay, what are 5 examples of this? Boom, it'll give you that. Oh, but that's ridiculous. But what are 2 examples of this? When
Hmm.
you start collaborating with the AI, it can, if it, it can get you into flow. And like
Yeah.
that's when magic happens, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. It's been such a good tool in that space and just like brainstorming. And
Yeah.
I'm sure as like I get better with the questions to ask it and the prompts, then it'll evolve into more. But it's crazy to think that like this is just the start of like
Yeah.
where it is and like what's happened in the last year, even with like the videos AI is able to create and like the images, and to think where we're going to be a year from now, it's
Oh, it's
absolutely
insane.
wild.
It's
Yeah.
insane. I mean, like I think it's Opus.pro is a
Yeah, I
tool.
have that.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so my a friend of mine told me about it a few weeks ago. I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. See, try it. Why not? Right. So
Mhm.
my partner in AI Fieldbook and we've been creating these like hour-long discussion videos where we just kind of go back and forth on some topic, right?
Mhm.
And we fed one of them to Opus.pro. We're like, well, we'll see. It was like, we'll see what the kitty table AI comes up with, right? I mean, we're like, yeah, we'll try it. And we
Yeah.
went through clip after clip after clip. We're like, oh yeah, post that. Oh yeah, post that, post that, post that. 20 clips in, I got to the end. I'm like, we just posted them all. Like, oh, it's like perfect. It like just split, took this long discussion, figured out exactly what the salient points were, summarize. I mean, it was amazing.
It's awesome. Yeah. It edits like the angles and the
Yeah.
text. You can customize it too. I was like
Yeah.
actually doing that this morning. I can customize the text and the like if you get I don't have the pro, I have like whatever the first package is, but you can even upgrade to the point where it will find images online to overlay on
I've
your
put the
screen.
B-roll, yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
B-roll. So it's and that's just probably going to get better and better
Yeah.
and cheaper as it becomes more common. So
Yeah, so
six.
there's a weird thing that like right now I think that it's important to become an expert in AI and a leader in it, and but that you have to think in terms of like being productive with it. So in other words, like I think there's so much noise in the space right now because it's so early that like there's kind of like the joke was like when computers first got CD-ROMs, it was the
Mhm.
first like thing that could store a lot of information. And so they released what people call shovelware at the time. They just dumped stuff onto it. So you get the computer and it would come with a CD-ROM with like, I don't know, an encyclopedia of everything and like a map of everywhere, like all this stupid stuff that was like, okay, well, that's not really useful. And I
Mhm.
think that when I look out there and there's all these like, here's 200,000 prompts for only $67. It's like, what do I do with that? And so I think that it's really important, like if you're looking to, have AI become part of like who you are, it's like a super suit. And I think it's all of our responsibility to feel it, to figure out what the super suit looks like for us. Like,
Yeah.
what is your super suit? What is my super suit? And be careful because it's easy to get distracted by all this noise, but a lot of it doesn't make your super suit go any faster.
Yeah.
Versus some things you're like, whoa, that's so I feel like this asymmetric upside thing applies to things that you're going to learn in AI. So you have to be very curious and hyper aware to like looking for things that are actually going to make AI useful to you and not getting pulled down these rabbit holes of things where it's like shovelware AI stuff.
Right.
It's
Right.
so
Yeah.
easy to do.
That's such a good point. And there's, I mean, that was so much tangible, actionable advice right there. Like I am like, I know we're wrapping up now, but like I would love to talk for like 5 hours on like this is just like awesome. And especially for like my generation, because like I think we take for granted all these new things that are coming, but like they are really new. And if you like you're talking about like you just like really study AI and you really learn how to use it, like there's such a big opportunity there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
um
what I would say on that too, I mean, I'm so glad that you're bringing it around to that too. Like, so, I graduated college in 1994, which is like, I mean, you couldn't talk up like right into this like generational change. Like the web came out right after I graduated. And I basically told myself, I'm going to become an expert on this. And I don't know
mhm.
exactly what that means, but I'm going to go all in on this thing. And that was the best thing I ever did. But not because obviously it helped creating successful companies, but it was just fun to
Yeah.
become an expert on that, to become really good, to go deep on that, to become a leader on that, like to put a company on a catalog company and transform them on the web. That was fun to build all these financial products on Wall Street and like, like to build all these things. It's like a lot of fun. And I feel like right now, AI is just as exciting as that was then. It's just
Yeah.
as transformational. Like I'm just as excited about it. So I think that we're all very lucky to be on the planet right now when this is being figured out because there's so much opportunity to go out there and transform, pick something, get curious about it, go deep on it and change it, transform it.
Yeah. That's a phenomenal note to wrap up on. Thank you so much. What's
Awesome.
the name of your podcast so people can find you?
So my podcast is called Founder Breakthroughs. So
Awesome.
I usually release anywhere between 2 and 4 episodes a month. And then
Awesome.
my other thing is AI Fieldbook. If you go to LinkedIn, you can find, I think on YouTube as well. Go
That's
to
a podcast.
it's we're putting out a lot of content, video content, stuff like that. So it's AIfieldbook.com.
Awesome. Okay. I'll make sure to link both of those below.
Cool.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure everyone gained
Awesome.
a lot of value from this. I know I did. And yeah, just thank you again for sharing your wisdom.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Patrice.